It's summer now, and with another 2 months passed, let's see what NeoSPCC has done. And we're starting with NeoFS. A new node release was made in June, bringing a number of improvements and fixes. The changelog is not that big, but we're trying to release early and release more often, and this particular version brought some significant stability improvements in some cases. So this version is now deployed to both testnet and mainnet, and it works just fine there. Development environment and all-in-one container were upgraded as well. So if you are interacting with NeoFS via CLI, or if you need some newer environment to develop your D apps on, go grab this release. HTTP and S3 gateways were updated to 0.27.1 versions. Coincidentally, they use the same release numbers. So these are mostly to update to SDK RC10, and there are no significant changes there. But at the same time, if you're running an HTTP gateway, and you're not likely to be running an S3 one, but anyway, if you're having some of these gateways, you can update to a newer version. We've made a huge progress towards SDK RC10. The div to RC9 at the moment has more than 100 commits that touch more than 100 files and have like 5,000 lines added and 2,000 lines removed, so it's a biggie. And it mostly deals with the pool code but touches other areas as well. So we plan to have release in August, and then we probably will make a pause. We have no other changes planned, and we're just waiting for your feedback. So if you are using SDK, please upgrade your applications and tell us what you think about it before we take 1.0. This theme is somewhere in between of NeoGo and NeoFS, but we have added the auto-generated RPC bindings to NeoFS contracts repository, and now we are converting users of these contracts to these new bindings. It started from gateways, we just called the NNS contract, and it looks quite promising there. Then we will move on to Node, and we expect to drop quite some number of lines from it. We have previously mentioned a number of times that we have a set of Ansible roles to manage NeoFS nodes and gateways. So these were recently refactored into an Ansible collection, and you can grab roles from this new repository while old ones are all archived and are no longer supported. Try it out and leave feedback in issues, if any. We have recently solved an interesting problem with NeoFS tests. This is a relatively small test suite that runs for some hours and produces a usual set of test metadata like pass, failed, start time, end time, and some set of logs. These logs are then processed with a tool that produces a nice Allure report, and suddenly we've got some hundreds of megabytes of data that needs to be stored somewhere. So initially we've tried using GitHub pages for it, since it's supposed to be suitable for the static content. But it used a repository branch for it, and we've got a problem of ever-growing GH pages branch that affected all of the fetches from the same repository. So it wasn't really usable. Then we have experimented with the newer GitHub pages that are deployed from an artifact produced during the GitHub action. And it was kind of nice, but we could only have one single report stored this way and served to users. And it was obviously unacceptable because we run these tests for the master branch, we run them for PRs, and we also want to have some history of these reports to be accessible and available for the users. So this made us scratch our heads a little, and we suddenly noticed that we are making a distributed object storage system, and maybe that would be helpful in some way in this case. So indeed, with some relatively simple scripting around the NeoFS CLI, we've got an upload functionality for these reports into NeoFS, and then they are served in the regular way from HTTP gateway, and it all just works. And we also will use the NeoFS expiration features for it because we want to store some reports for some longer time and some reports for some shorter time. And that's pretty easy to manage with expirations, with nodes, then deleting these reports when time comes. So it works just fine for us, and you may consider using NeoFS for some similar scenarios. Speaking of hosting things in NeoFS, we have moved FSNeo.org and NeoSPCC websites into NeoFS. So we have used this scheme previously for sendFSNeo.org, but it's a demo and it uses testnet and it also uploads objects into this network. Now, NeoSPCC and FSNeo.org websites are not demos, so they are using mainnet network. And we will soon prepare a page describing how all of this scheme works. So if you see these websites working, this means NeoFS works. We have a number of features waiting in the node queue and some features planned to be released with 0.38.0. One of them we have talked about earlier, that is the contract auto deployment and auto update functionality. The other one is pretty recent. We are going to replace a storage subsystem named Blobovnica with a newer one that will be called Peapod, since it's intended for little tiny objects. And there is going to be a migration tool provided in 0.38.0 release, and then in 0.39.0 we are going to remove Blobovnicas completely. So then we are going to explore protocol improvements around large object storage and some performance improvements in the networking area. And also we are going to improve our metadata handling. NeoGo was updated with 2 new patch releases that were primarily done to address some incompatibilities discovered on testnet, but the recent one also included some fixes and improvements. We have upgraded all of the NeoSPCC nodes to these new versions, but if you are running a node yourself, please upgrade as well. We have hosted 2 workshops related to contract and backend development in Go. If you haven't seen them, go to the Neo Smart Economy YouTube channel, it's there. And you can find out what the current state of the Go smart contract toolchain is. And you can also see what the modern backend development process looks like that uses a lot of auto-generated code to interact with deployed contracts. You probably want to ask where is the 0.102.0 release of NeoGo node. I can only say that we are totally dependent on the C# node 3.6 release there. It's not yet finalized, and therefore the protocol changes that it's supposed to bring are not yet finalized, and therefore we can't release a compatible NeoGo version. So we are tracking these changes, we are implementing them, and right now we are of course totally compatible with it, but things still can change, and therefore we can't roll this release out. Meanwhile, we are working on some changes of our own. One of them is the old RPC error improvement proposal that was laid out on the paper some time ago, but now we have a draft implementation of it, and it will land in NeoGo somewhere in August. And we also will include it, of course, in the next release. The other thing that we have spent some time on is zero-knowledge proofs. We have created a complete end-to-end example for them, from proof generation to proof check in a contract, and it's expected to be completed soon. And then we are planning to do some fixes for tests that we have, and then improve our RPC API for notary subscriptions, for general subscriptions, and also have some enhancements there.